We are now live. I am Ula Brenna's daughter. This is Saga Saturday. And
I'm Bersi Edvardason.
And I'm Dam Kinehild, and we are talking today about the Tale of Thorstein Shiver, which is a sort of comedic tale. And Bersi, I'm going to let you explain a little bit about
where it is, what's going on.
Yeah.
So this is a tale that's sort of a fun little episode in the middle of Olaf Saga Tryggvasonar, which means the saga of Olaf Tryggvason. He was one of the big King Olafs of Norway around the time of conversion. He and Saint Olaf are the big-time Christianizing kings in Norway. So this is a saga about his life, about his adventures, about how holy and great he is at being a king. It's in Flateyjarbók, which has many different tales, which was Flateyjarbók was written between 1387 and 1394. We know that because in the colophon at the beginning of the book, it actually lists the different priests. There's two main priests who are both named Jon and are credited for writing most of the manuscript. And the end date is because 1394 is the last date in the annals in the back of the book, so they stopped recording at that time. But the actual story itself was probably written a little bit earlier, around 1300.
Cool. Well, shall we tell the story of Thorstein Shiver?
let's tell the story of Thorstein Shiver. It is said that the following summer, King Olaf attended feasts in the east, around Vik and elsewhere. He feasted at a farm called Reim with a large company of men. There was a man accompanying the king at that time named Thorstein Thorkelson. His father Thorkel was son of Asgeir Scatterbrain, who was the son of Audun Shaft. Thorstein was an Icelandic man who had come to the king the previous winter. In the evening, while people were sitting at the drinking tables, King Olaf made a speech. He said that none of his men should go alone to the outhouse during the night, and that anyone who had to go must take someone with him. Everyone drank heartily that night, and when the tables were taken down, they all went to bed. Now, in the middle of the night, Thorstein the Icelander woke up and had to go to the toilet. The man lying next to him was sleeping soundly, and Thorstein certainly did not want to wake him up. So he got up, slipped into his shoes, threw on a heavy cloak, and went out to the privy. The outhouse was big enough for 11 people to sit on each side of it. Thorstein sat in the seat nearest the door. When he had been sitting there a few moments, he saw a demon climb up from the seat farthest in and sit down.
Who's there?
It's Thorkel the Thin, who fell with the other corpses fighting with King Harald Wartooth.
And where did you come from?
I have just arrived from hell.
What can you tell me about that place?
What do you want to know?
Who endures the torments of hell the best?
Oh, no one endures them better than Sigurd the killer of the serpent Fafnir.
What kind of torments does he suffer?
He kindles the oven.
That doesn't strike me as much of a torment.
Oh, yes it is, for he's the kindling.
There is something in that then. And now who has the hardest time enduring hell's torments?
Starkad the Old takes it the worst, for he cries out so terribly that his screaming is a greater torment to the rest of us fiends than almost anything else, and we never get any reprieve from it.
What torment is it that he takes it so badly, as brave a man as he was said to have been?
He stands up to his ankles in fire.
Why, that doesn't seem like much of a torment to me, as great a hero as he was.
Then you don't get it. Only the soles of his feet are sticking up above the flames.
Now that's something. Let me hear you scream, just once, the way that Starkad does.
Oh, all right.
The fiend then threw open his jaws and let fly a great howl, while Thorstein pulled the fur trimming of his cloak up around his head.
Is that the best you can do?
Ah, far from it. That is only the cry given by us tiny devils.
Scream like Starcad does, just once.
All right.
The fiend then began to scream a second time so terribly that Thorstein thought it was monstrous that such a little fiend could howl so loudly. Again, Thorstein wrapped his cloak around his head, but the crying paralyzed him, and he fainted.
Why are you so quiet now?
I'm silent because I'm amazed at what a horrible voice you have, as little a demon as you appear to be. Was that Starcad's loudest cry?
Oh, not even close. It was more like his quietest.
Stop beating around the bush and let me hear the loudest cry.
All right.
Thorstein prepared himself by folding the cloak, winding it around his head, and then holding it there with both hands. The ghost had moved closer to Thorstein by 3 seats with each cry, so that there were now only 3 seats left between them. The demon then inflated his cheeks in a terrible manner, rolled his eyes, and began to howl so loudly that it exceeded all measure for Thorstein. At that very moment, the church bell rang out and Thorstein fell unconscious to the floor. The demon reacted to the bell by tumbling to the floor. The sound could be heard for a long time down in the ground. Thorstein recovered quickly. He stood up and went to his bed and lay down. Now in the morning, everyone got up. The king went to the chapel and heard mass. After they sat down to eat, the king was not terribly cheerful.
Did anyone go alone to the privy last night?
Thorstein came forth and fell down before the king, admitting that he had disobeyed his orders.
It was not such a serious offense against me, but you prove what is said about you Icelanders, that you are very stubborn. But did anything happen?
Thorstein then told the whole story.
What good did you think his crying would do you?
I want to tell you, my lord, I thought that since you had warned all of us not to go out there alone, and since the devil showed up, that we would not leave the place unharmed. But I reckoned that you would wake up when he cried out, my lord, and I knew you would be helpful if you found out about it.
Indeed, it happened that I woke up to the sound, and I knew what was going on. I had the bell rung because I knew that nothing else could help you. But weren't you frightened when the demon began to scream?
I don't know what it means to be frightened, my lord.
Was there no fear in your heart?
I wouldn't say so, because when I heard the last cry, a shiver nearly ran down my spine.
You will now receive your nickname and be called Thorstein Shiver from now on. Here is a sword I'd like to give you in honor of the occasion.
Thank you, my lord.
It is said that Thorstein was made one of King Olaf's men and stayed with him thereafter until he fell on Olaf's ship, the Serpent, alongside the king's other champions. So there you have it. The tale of Thorstein Shiver and how he got his nickname against the poop demons.
One, I wanted to note, if folks want to hear a different sort of take on this, the podcast Saga Thing did do a recent episode on it, so that's totally worth checking out.
It is.
But one of the things that I think is quite interesting is how this story kind of eludes genre. Mm-hmm. It's a comedic story, but it's also a conversion story, but it's also a political story, and you've got so much going on.
Yeah, it really is a lot going on in that tiny little almost like throwaway story, but there's really a lot going on. It's stubborn Icelanders, it's conversion, it's pagan gods, it's all wrapped up in that nice little package. And
Thorstein Skelks' Shiver, but Old Norse, doesn't really show up very much outside of this tale. I mean, he's mentioned occasionally in other parts of this broader saga. But one of the key purposes of this tale, other than entertainment, because obviously, as we're saying, it's clearly quite funny. So there's an entertainment value there. Was to give one more example of how holy King Olaf is. He comes in and saves the day, and his saga is rife with little stories, very much like stories of Christ doing miracles in the Bible. It's King Olaf doing little miracles and converting people left and right, and they're always so happy to get rid of their pagan ways, and I can just see how much better this religion is, and then they immediately convert, things like that. This is just one more tale in all of that.
One of the papers that I read preparing for this was a paper by Kevin Richards called "The Outhouse from Hell: Negotiating the Norwegian Icelandic Political," and I've covered the title, "Political Tension in the Thorstein Skelks." And so you're talking here about Olaf having this very sort of holy persona. But one of the things that Richards talks about is that Olaf is in some ways representing Norway entirely. So talking about the 1300s, Iceland has come under the provenance of Norway. It's now part of the Norwegian kingdom. And so you've got this Icelander who is very stubborn, as all Icelanders apparently are, which does not surprise me a lick. And he has this, terrible experience in the largest outhouse I've ever heard described.
A 22-person outhouse? I'm not interested in that. Thank you very much.
Right. You and your 21 drinking buddies can all go visit the outhouse together. It's a wild good time.
That's the shower line at Great West.
Yeah, there you go.
That is kind of true.
But so you have this stubborn Icelander who in some ways sort of embodies Iceland. And he is reconciled with he kind of misbehaves, as Iceland did from time to time in the 14th century, who is then reconciled with Norway in the personification of King Olaf. And it's sort of a nice, neat sort of summary of their relationship, where he misbehaves, but Norway comes in and saves the day. And he goes to Norway and he says, Thank you, Norway, for once again saving my bacon from the evil demons.
Right.
And
Norway welcomes Iceland back with open arms and come back to the fold, but be thinking about it.
As at least claimed in such things like Landnámabók and the Book of the Land Takings and things like that, describing why Iceland was settled originally, fits in with this narrative perfectly. We've got a bunch of Norwegians who feel the tyranny of Harald Fairhair, who is trying to, or at least at this point, actually, he's still Tanglehair because he hasn't yet unified Norway, and he promised he was not going to comb or cut his hair until he had finished unifying it. So Harald Tanglehair was, levying taxes too hard, or people who had like political disagreements with him decided to leave, and they went to Iceland. And that's at least the story we hear about why people were settling it there. I'm sure some people were settling it for that reason, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that everyone going to Iceland was running away from Harald Fairhair. But as you said, Kinehild, at this point, they've had their period of independence under no king, no formal monarchy structure at all. And then by 1300, they'd already decided to go back underneath the Norwegian crown. And so, in this way, the storyline, Thorstein leaving, going to a dangerous place infested with demons and all manner of scary pagan things, and then converting and becoming a political subject of King Olaf, tying it back in.
So one of the other, and this is one of those moments where I think perhaps a professor of literature may be reaching too far. into his interpretation of the material, but maybe not. One of the other quotes from that piece that I thought was really kind of a little bit amusing, but also kind of maybe on the mark, was talking about the use of the privy as the space where much of the story takes place. And Richards notes, the privy functions as a daily, minute space of highly ritualized activity, where upon entering, its occupants enter a state of social non-being, though apparently you're entering with 21 of your buddies, so I don't know how non-social you're being, but whatever, where demons are purged and the individual becomes refreshed and renewed through this elimination of the non-self. And so you've got this very obvious, I mean, your morning ablutions are a ritual. Like, we all go through this sort of individual ritual. And obviously when you go to the bathroom, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Like, I hate it when coworkers, when you go into the restroom at the office and people are like chatting to you and you're like, excuse me, but I am having private time.
This is my cube. This is my box.
Right.
This box.
we don't look at each other, we don't acknowledge each other, but so I think there's some truth in that, but I don't know how much truth there is for somebody from the 14th century. You know, did they also experience this desire to be like, excuse me, but I am in the 21 person no stall privy, do not make eye contact? Or was it normal to be like doing your business and then like there's, I don't know, Thorstein sitting over there and he's like, hey, and how was the fishing this weekend, right? Like,
they do seem to strike up that conversation fairly readily.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not sure. The only other mention of like specific emphasis on outhouses in Norse literature I can think of off the top of my head is when Bolli in Lockstyler Saga, when one feuding party prevents the household of the other side of the feud from going into their outhouse for weeks.
That's just rude.
And so they have to use like a corner of their main house as their toilet. And this is one of the last things that happens between the two before all-out violence breaks out and people start dying.
My dad and I went to Iceland a few years ago, and one of the places we visited was the farmhouse at Stong. Yeah, so there's this beautiful reconstructed farmhouse, and it's a fairly large farmhouse. So they've got the reconstructed one at Eiríksstaðir, which is like 2 rooms, and the thought of being in that space all winter with my family, I don't murder would have happened.
Right.
Like, I love my family, but murder. And I, as somebody who lives in a subarctic climate, like, I get the long dark of winter. Murder.
It's
But the thought of being stuck, even in that larger farmhouse, where some corner of that, which it had an inbuilt privy, which was very fancy.
That's luxury.
Ooh, right.
But the thought of having to use, because it's those, there's no airflow. Yeah. Right, you've got the sod walls, it's wood on top, so it's a very tight space. There would have been smoke, there would have been all sorts of people, possibly animals. And there's no privacy. So now you've got this one sort of corner that's going to be stinking for whatever period of the year you're in it.
Let's hope that was winter.
Right, so of human waste, and that's a smell that's really hard to get used to.
Yeah. Yep.
So that is a truly terrible experience for the poor family in Loxdale. That is unpleasant.
Yeah.
But one of the other things we want to talk about today was Norse humor.
Yes.
Which this story is full of.
Oh, it's got it all. It's
like the whole, that doesn't seem like such a punishment to me. Well, it's because only his ankles stick out. And you're just like that's not something you would think of. When somebody says he stands up to his ankles in water, you're assuming he stands this way.
Right. Not
right. Gravity. But here he's sort of standing like that, right? Like only his sticking out. Or poor Sigurd, whose only crime was lots of things.
Only
Right.
So many crimes. But that he not only kindles the fire, but he is the kindling.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I'd seen talked about is this sort of flat, laconic humor. So the dry delivery.
Mhm.
Oh, you don't understand. It's only his feet that stick out of the flames, kind of thing. Where it's
Right.
or there's some great examples. I think you were talking, Bersi, earlier about the example from Grettir's saga
Mhm.
with the spears.
Was I talking about sphere?
Before we started recording, with the broad spears.
Oh yes, yeah. Where who was it? Atli or somebody?
Yeah.
Got stabbed in the stomach. He's basically disemboweled, and he's holding his own innards in, and makes some. Have you included it here?
Yeah.
Yes, it says, then he went to the outer door and saw nobody there. It was raining hard, so he did not go outside, but stood holding both the doorposts with his hands and peering around. At that moment, Thorbjorn sidled around to the front of the door and thrust his spear with both hands into Atli's middle, so that it pierced him through. Atli said when he received the thrust, "They use broad spear blades nowadays." Then he fell forward on the threshold. The women who were inside came out and saw that he was dead. Thorbjorn had mounted his horse, and he proclaimed the slaying and rode home. And then they lament his death. But yeah,
So you're using broad-headed spears this year. I
didn't get that. Could you try?
I'm sorry, Siri. It's gonna take a little while for you to get that.
I can't even explain to Siri what's going on here, and I don't know why she decided to pop up. Random. But yeah, it's almost dad humor in some ways, right? We're totally got some dad humor in here. Just that dry delivery. You could miss it if it's, if you're not paying attention, if you're kind of half zoned out, you won't get it. But there is some,
So one of the articles I was looking at is by a woman, Friedrichsdotter, who is obviously Icelandic, because using the patronymic. And the quote that I thought was particularly interesting from there was laughter, smiling, and witticism. So they use broad-headed spears these days. Whether in legend or in a more mundane, even bleak Icelandic Icelandic circumstances, it can raise men to heroic status when they're facing death or when they're in these hopeless situations. And characters such as the brothers Snorri and Thorthor achieve this posthumous reputation as brave and resolute because they're laying down these just like dry one-liners. It's the cowboy sort of swaggering in. He gets shot and he's like, I guess I won't be seeing the homestead again, and then sort of falls over dead and delivers that just like bon mot. That's the word I'm looking for. So that last throwaway line.
Mm-hmm. Very much like modern action heroes having to have that.
Getting the last word in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The kind of humor. Now, I'm not a classicist, and I don't pretend to be. But I did do a fair bit of reading of Greek things when I was younger, and I remember that in the Iliad, especially, we had a lot of moments where Greek warriors have just killed somebody, or they're in the middle of a fight, and they have these battles with their words as well as with their weapons. And one that always stood out in my head, I really liked because it was funny to me. It was funny in the same way that the Norse humor is funny to me. And I don't know, because I'm not a classicist, if it was intended to be funny, but it was Patroclus has just thrown a huge rock and smashed in the skull of some chariot driver, and very vividly his eyes pop out of his head and roll around in the dust, and he falls off the back of the chariot, and Patroclus says, look at the dive that man has. Imagine how many muscles he could gather from the bottom of the ocean, even in stormy or calm weather with a dive like that.
So what we need to repurpose that for is anytime we're watching the Spanish national team with a dive like that.
With a dive like that.
Oh my God.
Bringing it around to football, as I do.
Yeah.
No, but that is I think a very good parallel, because you've got that sort of dry, but also there's a certain superiority in, like, he's the one delivering that last line that I think I kind of feel like Atlee gets, where he's like, well, I'm gonna die, but at least I'm dying in a fashionable way.
Yeah.
Right.
And then just like collapses and dies. Or there's an example from Njal's saga, one of the characters, Kolskegger, upon chopping off the leg of his opponent, comments, "There's no need to look at the stump. It's just as you see, the leg is gone." And then the man dies. And it's just, he's like, you don't need to look at that.
We know it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
We're fine.
Good. So it is a kind of humor that I find quite delightful. And there's, like, when we think about the sort of Norse worldview, and next week, I think we'll talk about this again at the end, but next week, next session, we're going to do Havamal, and kind of talk about some of these sort of gnomic poetry. But this, the only thing that doesn't die is your good name. And so this kind of humor is establishing your good name. It's saying, even in death, I am unafraid, and I'm so unafraid, I'm going to make a really weird joke about it. And
Yep.
Embrace it.
And it shows it shows bravery and Icelandic stupidity, stubbornness. Let's go with stubbornness. It's not stupidity. Yeah. It's just it's kind of a devil may care attitude, right? Yeah. I'm already dead. I'm already dying or dead. Might as well, Although if I'm disemboweled with a spear, I probably would not be thinking, hey, we got broadheads this year.
But so it's fun, and I'm looking forward to the next discussion we have. But it's a humor that speaks to me, certainly. I wish that I would like to imagine that in my life I am that kind of witty, and I've got my wits about me in a situation where you're leaning out the door and then suddenly you're gutted by a spear.
Right.
You're able to call that, like, we don't know who sits around practicing, like, if I die by a spear, I'll comment on the style of the spear, right? So he, at least the way that the storyteller is presenting it, that he was so calm in the face of death that he was able to call forth this brief throwaway line that is so perfect, and we're obviously, it's such a great line that we're talking about it, a millennia later,
right? Exactly.
30 years later.
Well, we are, I think we're good on Thorstein Shiver and some silly bits about Norse humor and politics. Did you guys write Kennings?
I did.
I didn't, but I found Kennings other people wrote.
That works. All right, who's going to go first? Or we should Rochambeau here.
Kinehild, go first.
All right. So mine is a little longer than last time because I prepared it last night instead of the morning of. Fleet flying fiber bands leading scholars on the light road. Do you want me to say that again?
Say it again.
Fleet flying fiber bands leading scholars on the light road.
The internet.
Oh, yeah. Fiber bands.
I love it.
I liked fleet flying, and then I needed something to alliterate with fleet and flying, so it's like, shit. Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So I did not have a chance to. I'm in the morning of situation here. I didn't do my homework. So I just have sugar spackle.
Sugar spackle.
Frosting?
Yep.
Yay!
I was gonna say sprinkles.
Right. So I frosted a cake last weekend and I made a cake and had to use frosting to spackle it together because a corner fell off. So I was thinking about that. So that's, sugar spackle is frosting.
I like
what do you think about Bersi?
I'm not even morning of. I am while we were preparing earlier, right before we went online. So I have my old homework, a verse I translated last semester for my Old Norse poetry class. Shall I just read the Old Norse? I can do. So there is about almost every single noun in this verse is a kenning. So I can read it in old. I'll read it first in Old Norse, and then I'll read my translation of it. Krupum ver fyr vopna, vertegs brukum egi svobald hilder, at hjaldri haldord I brug skjaldar, hotbad mik, thar mutisk, minskjord bera fordur, klakkar is og hausar, kjamstar I gnu malma. So that is just to clarify first before I go into this, there's sort of an aside. This is a kind of poem that has essentially within the larger text another little sentence that's like a stage aside. You might hear it. Otherwise, you might be confused because my sentence will be broken up by another sentence in the middle of it. We do not creep before the commotion of weapons in the hollow of the shield at the battle. So bade the faithful Hilder of the Hawkland. Formerly, the neckring bearer bade me to bear my helm support proudly. There, when the ice of battle and skulls met one another in the din of metal.
Wow.
That's that's lovely.
So
it is a very
do we want to just knock out all of them? Most of them are pretty easy, I think. So there's commotion of weapons.
So battle.
The hollow or curve of the shield is exactly what it sounds like. The faithful Hilder of the Hawkland.
The faithful Hilder of the Hawkland. Hawkland is one of Hilder is
arm.
Battle and victory,
like a
right?
Forearm.
So yeah,
the
right? Hawkland is the arm or the forearm or the hand.
Yeah.
And Hilder, yes, does mean battle, but it's also a woman's name.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a Valkyrie's name. And in this case, it's just like the god kennings for man, where you say the Uller of bows or the Odin of spears just means a man or a warrior. In this case, we've got the Hilder of Valkyrie of the hand, which just is a kenning for women.
Okay, cool.
And so the faithful Hilder of the Hawkland is just a faithful woman. Formerly the neckring bearer.
So a woman again.
Woman again.
Woman again, yeah.
Bade me to bear my helm support proudly.
Head?
Your head.
Yep, your head.
Keep your head up. Is that what we're going here? Is keep your chin up?
Keep your chin up. There when the ice of battle.
The
ice
fear
of battle?
What'd you say, Kinehild?
Like the fear of battle, the
Death, isn't it?
No, just a sword.
Oh.
Okay.
Just a sword.
Trying too hard there.
When the ice of battle and skulls met one another in the din of metal.
Battle again.
Battle again.
Yeah.
So you can see battle comes up quite a bit.
Well,
that is, I like that. And what poem is that?
I wish I wrote it down on this, but I can look through my notes from the class, and I can find that and post it in the comments of the video, in case anyone's wondering.
cool.
I think it's real. I like that one. That was a good choice.
That was
an excellent translation.
Nicely done. All right, we're running up on time here, so I think we've had enough poop demons for the day. Although I don't know, never enough poop demons. Kinehild, as he said, we are next week. We're gonna skip next week. We're gonna go to a bi-weekly status so that we can have our Saturdays back for a little bit. And next So 2 weeks from now, whatever that date is, we'll be discussing the Have 'em All. And we'll figure out what that looks like in 2 weeks. But I want to thank you guys again for playing along with this silly, silly game. I enjoy nerding out with you guys so much. And until next time.
Bye.
Bye.